this way, they only looked at different requirements, and if it met the paperwork requirements for the city, they would move forward with it. It didn't get a council vote. Livable Arlington and other groups in the city were not able to present evidence or present their case for why they think it should be rejected. And Livable Arlington also said that after looking at the plans, they found that the wells that were being planned at Rocking Horse were within the 300-foot limit. There needs to be at least 300 feet between a protected building, which is like a medical office or a school. And they found that these new wells were actually planned within that distance, within the protected buildings. And so there was some concern on their behalf that this was a way for Total and other energy companies to be able to frack or drill in these areas without going through a council process. And that kind of led me to write my more overview story of why people believe that natural gas drilling is having a small resurgence in this area. There's many different theories on why, and one, especially from city officials, is that they believe that Total, which bought these leases from other energy companies, needs to be able to hold the rights to the leases. So they have to drill every so often in order to maintain their mineral rights. So that was one theory. The other theory was that natural gas prices have rebounded faster than oil prices in the COVID-19 economy. So I think there's the ideas of experts are that the reason why they're doing this is so they can show their investors that they're looking into different ways to bring in income. And also they already put so much of their money into getting the permits and to putting in all this legal work. So it's like a sunk cost for them. They can just, drill immediately. So that's something I've been covering a lot, and I'm sure it'll continue to be a major topic. And then as far as things that are more local to Arlington, I've covered something that's called sanitary sewer overflows, which sounds like it is exactly what it sounds like. Essentially, it's wastewater coming out of sewage pipes directly into bodies of water or into the street. It's most harmful when it goes into bodies of water, and both Fort Worth and Arlington have faced many fines for this over the years. I wrote down that Arlington has faced 3 fines for sewage overflows in the last 5 years, and they have one of the poorest ratings of all Texas cities in terms of how they handle sewer overflows. And so this is a picture of French Lake in Fort Worth, but that was only because that was the most recent kind of incident in which Fort Worth was cited for that. And they based their citations and the fines on how many fish were killed and how many gallons were spilled into the body of water. So this has been an ongoing issue for many cities. I believe in Arlington, they've been able to kind of avoid fines or paying fines if they install a certain amount of technology to address the issue. And so they have funded projects like smart man covers, which allow them to monitor the water levels and to predict if there's going to be a wastewater overflow. So they can see something that's out of the norm and maybe go look at that and see, oh, is there an issue here? But yeah, okay. So as far as the Crystal Canyon National Area and the tree ordinance, there has been an ongoing effort by Sherry Capehart on the City Council and the Planning and Development Committee or Department to incentivize developers to update their tree ordinance and to encourage developers to not tear down these trees. Now, there is some debate over this because there is a traditional set of tools they have to incentivize developers, but I spoke to a UT Arlington professor who believes that there has not been enough incentives. It's still cheaper for them to cut down the trees and just pay the fines than it is to actually use these incentives to their advantage. So that tree ordinance has not yet been adopted, but it has been in workshop for it's literally been, I think, since January, and will likely be passed pretty soon. And then it's mostly to protect the cross timbers and the post oaks in that area, as many of you know. So as far as, this was one of the bigger projects that I worked on since I've come to the Star Telegram. It was brought to my attention by someone who lived very close to the expansion of I-20, 820, and 287. And one of their main concerns was that they believed that a lot of Fort Worth people who would be affected by this Southeast Connector project had their concerns addressed by TxDOT, but they had only recently heard of it as an Arlington resident. So they were basically saying, why have Arlington folks been left out of this conversation, even though they're going to see 15 acres of trees be torn down near their house, or they're going to need a noise barrier near their home, but there isn't one planned right now. So this was a pretty interesting one in terms of the difference between how Fort Worth residents felt versus Arlington folks who lived right next to it. And there was some concern that maybe TxDOT had not taken into account how loud it was going to be in terms of noise pollution and how it would affect the ecosystem. Okay, I'm running through this. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. Okay, I also wanted to speak about some of what the Arlington reporter, Kaylee Broussard, has done since she's been here. She actually interviewed Grace Darling for one of these stories, so the ACC has been in the paper. It was about this Arlington townhome project that eventually the city did decide to move forward with, I believe. And she's also covered the concerns of how Arlington homeowners believe that this dam breach that's been ongoing for several years could cause more erosion and property damage. But yes, if you ever need to reach her, I put her email here. She is covering more government accountability and city hall events, but she is like trying to fill the gap in terms of what are city officials up to. And then I wanted to include some of the reactions, not to like toot my own horn, but just to show that people seem to be reading a lot of this environmental coverage. I think honestly, the Star-Telegram and some of my editors have been a little shocked in terms of how people have responded to some of our stories. Like even this past weekend, my editor got a voicemail from a woman who was like, thank you for writing about this wastewater plant. And he was like, what? Like he was like shocked that people really respond to this stuff. Even when we did a story in Granbury about a sewage plant they're planning there, I mean, there were so many people who were really happy that we looked at that and that we were there to really talk to folks who were concerned. So this is just to show you that people are reading it. And we also have been lucky to just get a lot of support from our community, including you guys. Okay, so what kind of stories am I looking for in terms of if you ever see something locally that you want the Star-Telegram to write about? This is kind of how I categorize them, but of course, if something falls outside of these categories, I'm still interested. Especially when it comes to how are Arlington residents affected by environmental issues. I think it always helps to illustrate rather than tell people how an ordinance or a new, highway project. I want to show people I want to show our readers like who's actually affected by that. And then as far as solutions-oriented stories, I think that is where this group would come in many ways, as far as like, what are people thinking about doing to address these issues? What's working elsewhere that could work in Arlington, Tarrant County, Fort Worth? We did a story a few months ago, I guess that was August, that was about a group called Project Bluebird, which has been installing a bunch of these bluebird nest boxes along the Trinity. And they've seen, pretty substantial growth in how many bluebirds decide to nest along that area, even though it is being heavily developed right now. And they don't think that if they had not done what they're doing, they would not be there. The birds would not want to come near all of this construction. So those are the types of stories that I'm looking for. And then as far as land use and development, we're trying to illustrate like how are developers and the people who live near new housing developments thinking about how natural resources will be affected and how development affects them, whether that wastewater, whether it affects wastewater treatment, how much water they're going to need in that community, different things like that. And then what can cities do to preserve land and resources? In Fort Worth, there is a new initiative to buy land to preserve it, and they did that with a property called Broadcast Hill that I covered a few months ago as part of the sort of Tandy Hills area of Fort Worth. And so we wanted to see, you know, how is Arlington? What are they doing to preserve the land and the resources? Okay, and so this is just how you can support this type of reporting. I wanted to include this just so you know how important it is that we get your ideas and your feedback. And you can reach me at the email above, which is just hsamsel@startelegram.com. And then I only included these links, no pressure, but if you ever are wondering how you can really support and show that there is an appetite for environmental reporting in Fort Worth and Arlington in Tarrant County, you can help us by either just reading our stories, donating to RFA, or subscribing. So yeah, I flew through that, but thank you.
Thank you, Haley. That was very informative. We do have some chat questions here. Just a second. And I will, let's see, chat. Here's chat. Okay, the first question is, where is French Lake in Fort Worth?
It is in Fort Worth, yes, not Arlington.
Okay, is it near Eagle Mountain Lake or?
I have to look it up on a map for you. This is also where my lack of Tarrant County like geography is coming into play. Like I can't locate it for you right now, but.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Another question, it's concerning the sewer overflows. Please talk about that a little more. Does the city just pay a fine and that's it? When do they fix the problem? And which agency has oversight and or collects the fines?
Yeah, so I can answer many of those questions. So, okay, so it's a little different for Fort Worth and Arlington. Fort Worth is enrolled in this program that is focused on improving wastewater overflows and improving their system so that it, basically if they have maintenance issues, like if there's like a busted pipe, they're trying to prevent that by conducting maintenance, by cleaning out their pipes. In Arlington, most of the sewage overflows, I believe it was 79%, are caused by grease that has been left in the drain or going down the drain. So the cities have to focus on encouraging their residents to not do that or to flush like flushable wipes, that type of thing. So that's kind of what causes it. As far as the city just paying a fine, Arlington's not enrolled in this sewage overflow program that's run by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, which regulates this type of thing. That's who they pay the fine to if they have a massive sewer overflow. When do they fix the problem? They fix the problem right away, because if they don't have documentation that they've cleaned out the water source and that they've tried to address the environmental harm by like either replacing the fish or doing some other type of work, then they're going to get fined more. So they have to show that they've cleaned it up and that they addressed it very promptly. They have to have all this paperwork. They also only self-report these to the TCEQ. So it's not something that, you know, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is coming out here to like conduct inspections. It's just sort of like a policing yourself type of thing. And like I said, it's often this idea that they can replace having to pay the fine with deciding to spend that money on some new technology or on maintenance work. They just have to show the TCEQ that they're doing that. So yeah, many different answers to that question. The story goes like really in depth on that. And it's actually pretty interesting because I don't think it's something that a lot of people know about.
I certainly was not aware of any of that. Next question. I see a lot of your stories on the front page of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram that I get online. Is the online version the same for everyone, or is it customized by city?
It is the same. Yeah, it's the same for everyone, I believe. It does come out at different times. So I think it's kind of interesting with the Star Telegram because I have found that we kind of have two audiences. We have people who will only read the paper, you know, like they might just go to like the e-edition or they look at it in print. But those stories that we put in print were published like 2 days ago or whatever. So it's kind of interesting because we have like two different audiences that we're trying to serve. And there's some readers that are just like, I'm only going to read this if it's in front of me on Sunday. Or I saw this on Facebook and I'm kind of like tangentially interested. So it is the same for everyone, but I think people read stories at different times. I get emails on Sunday versus when it came out on Thursday.
Okay, another question. One of Arlington Conservation Council's big issues is that privet is overtaking our parks, our city parks. Privet is killing park trees, including post oaks, and no one seems to be concerned. Have you heard anything about this issue?
I have not heard anything about this. So if you could please discuss, I would be interested to hear about it.
Okay, well,
You might have to unmute him though, but I could also reach out later because I haven't heard about this, but I wonder if it's come before the city council or anything.
I have a feeling it has. I know the park that's down the street from me, Randall Mill, and Tandy Hills over there in East Fort Worth is overrun with privet. And it is killing all of the post oaks and any of the other cross timbers. Not to mention that it's not allowing, the undergrowth, any other undergrowth except for privet. And besides all that, some of these big box stores are still selling privet on their shelves in the garden center.
Yeah, I literally was just with Don Young, who's like the Friends of Tandy Hills director, and he was talking about like the invasive species situation. So yes, that's interesting. I didn't realize that it was like so widespread, like just locally.
Yes, it is. It's a real problem.
Okay.
So here's another part of another question. If we have a subscription to the Fort Worth Star Telegram, can we set the system where we get a notice when you post a story?
That's a great question. I believe, we have a daily newsletter that comes out every morning and afternoon. So that's the way that I honestly see a lot of the stuff that we publish because it is hard to follow all the time. Because you don't want to be like scouring for it. There isn't anything for me specifically. I believe right now the only person that we have set up for 2 people, and it's our columnists who get that notification. And I think it's only for Bud Kennedy and Mac Engel. But I don't know. I think that honestly would be a good idea because there are people who really just want to follow one topic. So I could talk to them. I have talked to David Hopman. He is the person that I talked to about the cross timber story and the tree ordinance. So he would be good to talk to again.
The Dr. Hoffman, you said?
Yes, Grace mentioned him in the chat. Yes, that's what I saw. Yeah.
And then one more question, and then we'll unmute everyone for a general discussion. Do you think that climate change has become more of an issue recently and with the election? Climate change.
Yes. So I think it was interesting because a few months ago, I wrote about a new group, 350.org, which has a new Fort Worth chapter. And so when I wrote that story, it's supposed to be, the group is specifically focused on like, how can we fight climate change locally? And there was a good response to that as far as people saying like, wow, I have never heard of like anyone in Fort Worth caring about this issue or like doing or like making a whole group dedicated to that. I do think it's interesting in Tarrant County because I find that people are talking about environmental issues more often, even in their campaigns or just like, they will say like, I want to protect water quality, I want to protect air quality. I think that in our area, though, people do tend to avoid the words like climate change or like climate crisis, especially in their campaign literature, because they don't want to be attacked for that. But I do think it's becoming more of an issue. I never expected people to be talking about it so often often. So I'm actually working on a story right now about how environmental issues might be playing out in our elections locally and if it's a top concern for people. Because at the beginning of the year, there was so much focus on like the climate protests and Greta Thunberg and all of these different initiatives by young people. And I do think the pandemic has affected people's priorities in a lot of ways, but it is still something that's brought up very often. Yeah. We can't hear you, Carol.
Carol, we can't hear you. Can you hear us? You're muted, Carol.
I am muted. My husband's been wanting to do that for ages. I wanted to thank you, Haley, and invite you to become a member of the ACC, which you can do by going to our website, and there's a application to fill out to join ACC. And also, if you wanted to be on our newsletter.
Yes, I think I am signed up already. So I'm already on the newsletter.
Okay, good. Well, we certainly invite you to become a member. And these days it's easy because all you have to do is sit at home and Zoom with us.
Love that.
Does anybody have any questions? You'll have to unmute yourself if you want to talk. But you should have the ability to do that.
I would like to invite you to visit some of the areas that we have tremendous privet problems with. River Legacy, OS Gray,
Wildscape.
the Wildscape. Some of these, you can walk a mile and you're seeing privet time after time after time. And what it does, it's a monoculture. It's always green. When the seeds drop from the oak trees, they can't grow because the monoculture is totally shading them. This is an invasive from China. I'm not going to go there. There's other invasives we're dealing with right now. But please come and see some of that.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that.
What is the Indian Creek? Is it?
Yes, I know that invasive species have been one of the main problems at Tandy Hills as well, and also finding people to help them like rid the property it's so much. It's like 160 acres. So it's been an interesting conversation.
It's really a big problem. And privet also doesn't contribute to the leaf litter. So not only does it block the sun and sucks up the nutrients for all the other plants around, it doesn't contribute anything to the environment.
And wildlife can't use it for anything.
So
That's exactly.
A host for anything. That doesn't really support a hiding place for birds. That's about it.
yeah.
I think the best example of privet overtaking is the west side of River Legacy, where the mountain bike paths are. The mountain bikes love it because they have paths all over in it, and you think you're in a forest and you're just going around in circles in the privet. But it prolific. It's taken over half that park, and it's taken over Village Creek also.
Yeah, Village Creek is really
Well, and private homes that the squirrels and stuff are bringing the seeds, and all of a sudden you get a privet plant growing in your yard, which a lot of people maybe think is terrific, but they're just then spreading that little invasive thing around.
birds bring
The
it.
little seeds and stuff that you have to, we're always trying to be careful not to chop it down before the berries come out so that the birds don't spread it farther. Yeah, it's killing all the native plants. That's what it's doing.
to unmute your audio, you need to put your mouse on the mute button and then right click and it'll allow you to unmute it. Just clicking on it won't unmute it. Little red icon on the bottom left of your screen.
We have one more from Grace in the chat room. Haley, I'd like to recommend you get in touch with Edith's group at the North Texas, no.
Yeah, it's like Council of Governments.
Central Texas Council of Governments.
Yeah.
That's a mouthful.
Yep.
Lots of opportunity for juicy stories there. Ooh.
Yeah, we actually are meeting with Scoop for all you guys. We actually are working on a series of stories. Me and the growth reporter, whose name is Gordon Dixon, we are working on some stories about just like what are the environmental consequences of growth broadly? Like how do we address flooding? How do we address the growing heat issues for people? And how, you know, putting down this pavement for development leads to more heat and pollution for the city. So we are talking to the Council of Governments, but thank you for the suggestion.
Could you explain how the process works when you write a story? Who approves it? Who do you have to, is there any sort of, is it difficult to get a story approved, or just how that process works?
You know what's funny is like I feel like every single thing that I've pitched to my editor, he's been like, yeah. Like I haven't had too many issues being like convincing him to like let me write something. At times he's the one who's like, you need to write this like immediately. So the process is mostly either my editor notices something. So for example, like if they notice that there's a lot of development going on in like Wise County, they want me to talk to people developing in Wise County, how they're, you know, planning to develop so that it doesn't overwhelm the system or like the natural resources there. But most of the time it's me seeing something or getting a tip from like the Sierra Club or you guys or Livable Arlington saying like, hey, we're kind of worried about this. You should probably look into this. Even that the wastewater overflow story came from Lon Burnham, who's the former state representative for Fort Worth, who just got an email from an activist who said like, hey, Fort Worth just got fined for this. And he was like, what is this? Like he literally just sent it to me and was like, I don't even know what this is. Like, can you just see what this is? And then it led me to being like, what is this whole fining system? Like, how does this work? So most of the time, if I tell my editors, like, I do think people are interested in this and that they need this information, they go with it. I've never had a situation so far, but I've only been here 4 months where they were like, no, that story is not happening. Yeah, a lot of freedom here right now because something I have found is that, you know, there aren't a lot of other people like fighting me on these stories. So there's a lot of opportunities to cover things that are going on that nobody else has touched. Yeah.
You find
Go ahead.
Oh my God, I love this.
somebody else was talking. Do you find that growth is a big controversial issue in Arlington? Or do you find that everybody's pro-growth, or are a lot of people concerned that we're growing too fast and not taking enough precautions?
Yeah, and Grace kind of asked that question too just now. She just said, like, what are the main environmental issues facing Arlington? Is there anything new? I would say the growth story has been going on for so long, but I think it's been a little undercovered by us at the Star-Telegram. You know, in the past year, our editor has made that a big focus as far as like what actually happens now that all these people are showing up and we have to build all these homes and businesses to accommodate them. And as people sprawl, me and Gordon especially have talked about like, how do we make this so it's not just like a business story every time? Because a lot of those stories can kind of end up just being like a press release about 10,000 homes going in. And so you want it to be a little bit more nuanced. It's sort of like the issue around fracking, where I think it used to be more of a focus on people making money off of mineral rights. And now people are wondering, you know, like what's the consequences of these methane leaks and stuff like that. As far as Grace's question, anything newish? That's a good question. I feel like air quality has come up a lot more in the past few months for me than I initially expected, because we are trying to cover more. I at least have made it more of a priority to cover more of like how industrial pollution affects the area, like what are the long-term consequences. So I think that might be something I explore in Arlington. But yeah, that's something I've covered in Midlothian. We kind of had to cover it with Grand Prairie because they had that massive plastics fire. So that might be something that I'm looking into soon. I feel like I've talked a lot.
Okay, well,
Arlington's only
do you
industry
have any other, go ahead. Any other questions out there or comments for Haley or for the ACC members in general?
But yes, if you guys, I will look into this. I kind of want to do something on invasive species anyway. So this is my impetus to do so. And I will reach out.
Okay, well, if we don't have anything else, Dick, do you want to end the meeting?
I think so. If nobody has any other items they need to talk about. Is there any announcements that other than the ones that have been posted that people want to make? But everybody's muted. People don't want to talk. So
I have one announcement. We have the Native Plants of Texas, the North Central chapter located in Fort Worth, is having a sale in Arlington on the 24th of October. And we'll have, I don't know how many plants. These are all native plants. You can simply go to txnativeplants.org, and there's a gallery full of all the plants, and we are doing it a little different than we've done plant sales in the past, in that we're having half-hour time slots that we let 15 people sign up for. And that seems to have worked really well. We did that with the Wildscape plant sale that was just 2 weeks ago, and we sold more plants during the pandemic, $500 more than we sold in last year in the pre-pandemic time. So come out and see us. This is going to be at River Legacy on the 24th.
What time of day?
10 o'clock to 2 o'clock.
But you pre-register online.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
And it's real simple.
I have one final question. One of the things we're dealing with is that our park budgets have been cut quite substantially due to city funding being cut because of the virus. And one of the things that we deal with is natural areas rather than parks in general. For example, Randall Mill Park has a lot of baseball fields and pavilions that they can rent and earn money, but the natural areas don't earn any money. So the park budget, I was told, and Grace may know more about this than I know, but that the parks have to raise money. Parks Department uses the parks to raise money for their budget, that they don't get that much other than what's raised by the parks. So have you ever looked at how, say, Arlington is funding their parks and the environmental stuff, and how other cities are doing it?
I did talk to Kaylee, the Arlington City Hall reporter, and we were talking about this issue as well, because we were like, well, what parts of the budgets are going down and how does that affect maintenance of a lot of these places? Because obviously parks have gotten a lot more use during the pandemic too. So I think that that's led to a lot of issues in terms of like, they're getting more use, but they have less money to take care of them. Where do you prioritize your funds? So yeah, I would like to look into that, especially considering how does Arlington compare to like the rest of Dallas-Fort Worth? Like how do they, like how are other cities dealing with those cuts? So that's a good idea.
Dick Shack.
Yes.
John Digas. Haley, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've been around the Star Telegram since 1970.
Love it.
You weren't born in 1970.
Nope.
And it is wonderful to see you in this job. You're caring for the community. You're getting the word out. It makes me think that maybe the Star Telegram will survive if it has more people like you. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you. It's so nice to hear. Also, I mean, I think the thing that I was most surprised that when I joined the Star Telegram was how many people from all of these different environmental groups like immediately reached out and were like, how can we help? Do you know things? Like, what do you need to know about? So it's been really great to get to know. And I was very happy to be invited to this because I already heard about the organization via my coworker, Haley, who had interviewed Grace. So it's really nice to meet all of you virtually. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, Carrie, about should natural areas charge for tours to bring in revenue? I think that's a good question, especially now that people are going out to these areas more. Also, look out for a story tomorrow in the Star Telegram that's about Tandy Hills and a lot of the issues that they've had with photographers in the area. I just spoke with Don Young and a few photographers there, and also the city of Fort Worth about how they address this. But that's actually been a big question they've asked, like, should we start charging people for permits so that we can use some of this money to take care of the land? There's a lot of controversy around it, but that'll be out tomorrow.
One of the things that natural areas, there's a lot of research that shows how much they improve people's health. And if you look at some mental health issues, therapy is about 30% successful, medication about 30% successful, and just getting out into nature is about 30% successful. But nobody makes money off of people walking in the natural areas. So, but that's sort of, we don't have good measures that we can bring to the city council and to say, here's what contribution we're making in terms of citizens' health, prevention of mental illness and all the kinds of other things. But that may be a good story to just sort of highlight that. And there's a lot of research out there.
I also think it's like cities will often say like it's important that we preserve open space or like that we invest in this. But I think people, in order to keep it open to everyone, it costs a lot of money. So I think a lot of people don't realize that how much upkeep is involved.
And one of the things we're dealing with in Randall Mill Park is that we want plants to cover the ground so it doesn't erode as quickly as it is, and taking down trees. But people expect natural areas to be mowed. People are worried about snakes, and they get a lot of complaints. The city gets a lot of complaints that they expect natural areas to look like their backyard lawn or front yard lawn. So I think educating on that particular, that natural areas are there to be natural, and part of being natural is to have critters and a lot of other things that a lot of people are afraid of, bees and things like that. So education, I think, is very, very important for people to understand what it is we're living in, a space that a lot of critters. For example, when we have big floods, the critters, at least in Village Creek, come out and roam the neighborhoods for food because the parks are flooded and they can't find food in the parks. So there's a lot of just general education in terms of how our ecosystems work.
Yeah. Okay. Also, I'm just going to type my email in this chat real quick so everyone has it. If you see anything or like any upcoming events, and also everyone at ACC already has my email anyway, but you can hit me up there. Yes. Thank you for all this, these good tips. I think I am going to follow up on a few of them and talk to my editor about doing them. So thank you.
Great. We are very appreciative. When I saw a lot of your stuff on the front page of the Star Telegram, I thought, wow, that's really good. We're finally getting, I don't think I've seen very many environmental stories on the front page before you got here. Well, they just didn't appear. So
Right.
really, really nice to see that.
Yes, my editor is his name is Tom Johanningmeyer. He's very into this stuff because he is a like cyclist. So I think he's honestly the person who was like, environmental reporter, like he wanted this. So we have support.
That would be another issue. I think you may have written about it. The Vellum Trail that's supposed to go around the DFW so people can bike. And we're not connected to Fort Worth, but they supposedly we can be connected or we will be, but they got to get the money, and there's not. I think there's the bike trails are packed all the time at River Legacy, but you just go back and forth, and that interferes with people walking. So the bike issue is really one of the ones that would be something to cover. I think we had a bike plan, but that was so controversial that I think they just sort of ignored it.
Okay.
They put Center Street as the bike path, and Center Street is not. It's too dangerous to ride your bike on. The bike paths.
Okay. Yes, we did cover a little bit of like the cycling craze during the pandemic, especially in Fort Worth, because there was like collisions and like a man almost was paralyzed. It was insane. So we have covered a little bit of it, but I would be curious to see like for the future, like what are the plans for that? Okay. These are all great ideas. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Okay, Haley, did you read the rest of the chats too?
I did. I wrote down many things.
Okay, good. Well, we've been recording, so I'll stop the recording now of this meeting. But that's.
I think you got it.
Well, let's see.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Haley.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Haley.
And I'll have to meet you guys in person sometime, hopefully next year.
You bet.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Alrighty.
Good.
Bye-bye.
I knew that today was Wednesday and it wasn't Tuesday day, but available for
Since we have a few board members here, I'd like to see what people thought. One of the things I was thinking of is that muting everybody automatic right at the very beginning, nobody unmuted. So there was no discussion. And ACC meetings are usually a lot of, there's a lot